Hi, and welcome to At-Home Art Lessons with the Art Groupies. The Art Groupies help us develop great art habits. The groupie that we're going to be working with today is Stretch. Stretch is the art groupie that likes to experiment and play and take risks and try things that he's never done before. Explore. And the best artist to explore with is Claude Monet. Claude Monet is my favorite Impressionist artist, and he loves to paint with light. Claude Monet's favorite subject to paint was found in his garden. He would paint his pathway up to his house. He would paint the water lilies in his pond. He would paint crabapple blossoms in his crabapple trees. So he was inspired by his very own garden. This is an actual picture of his garden in France, and that's on my bucket list to go and explore one day. So we're going to be inspired by Claude Monet's magical garden. We're going to use mixed media to create this landscape. We're going to be using pastels and crowns. We're also going to be using paint, but we're going to be using something other than paintbrushes to create our magical garden. We might even throw in some beans or some rice, whatever you have around the house to create your magical garden. So this is a landscape, and we're going to start our landscape with drawing a horizon line. A horizon line is a line that goes horizontally through your paper to create the separation of sky versus the land. On my horizon line, I'm going to create a square for a building that I'm going to have all the way in the background of my picture. In the foreground, I'm going to make that path. Now, my path is going to start off wide, and then as I move to the horizon line, I'm going to make that path seem like it's going into space, creating depth. So I started my line out wide, and then I moved it closer together at the horizon line to make it show depth, show space. So like I said, this is going to be a mixed media project, so I'm going to use different materials, and I'm going to color in different areas, not fully, because I'm going to use other mediums to create my magical garden. So right now I'm just using a blue pastel, coloring it horizontally, not vertically, trying to stick with my lines going in the same direction. I'm using a lighter blue on the side instead of on the top, making the areas fill in a little bit more, and also going over that dark blue to kind of blend those colors, make that blurry appearance that you always see in Impressionist artwork, because they're not really into having things look realistic and exact. They're more interested in showing the impression of the sun falling on different subjects or landscapes. Monet was always interested in painting the same landscape or the same area over and over again, but doing it at different times of the day, because the same area would look different when the sun just peaked up and the sun was rising in the sky versus what the sun looked like at its highest part maybe in the afternoon versus when the sun was setting, how the sun would appear to fall differently on different areas. He was really fascinated with that and thought that the entire painting and the entire feel of the painting would change because of the way the light fell on the different objects. and landscapes. So now I'm coloring in the background of my magical garden. I added light green in the background, and I'm going to show you some ways to make some darker green up towards the foreground. Just like I said, it's wider because it's closer. It's going to be darker because it's closer, and as it gets farther away, it gets lighter where this gets smaller. So I'm going to use a simple washcloth that I cut into a strip, and I wrapped it around a plastic fork and tied it up with a hairband. I'm going to use this to create a unique way to make the foliage in my foreground. Artists sometimes don't always paint with the paintbrush. They like to use other things to create the different natural feel of stamping or other objects to get that natural feeling of bushes and greenery and grass. So I'm using a fork with a washcloth wrapped around it and a simple hairband to tie it together. I'm going to pull some of this color to the back, not a lot of it, because like I said, the darker color should be up in the foreground. So now I'm going to add some flowers. So again, the foreground should have some big flowers and bold flowers. So maybe I would glue down some paper flowers in my mixed media landscape of my magical garden. And I simply took paper and I laid it on top. I picked out 3 different colors, and I would cut out a simple shape. There I cut out a circle. This time I'm going to cut out a simple U shape, maybe to represent some tulips. Put them in the foreground. So my flowers in the foreground would appear bigger than the flowers in the background. To get my flowers in the background, I'm going to use Q-tips or cotton swabs, and I'm going to, again, I tied it with a hairband on a vegetable skewer, and I'm going to dip my Q-tips in some color. Not just one color, I used a bunch of different colors, because as you can see in Monet's garden, he had lots of different varieties of flowers and lots of different colors. So we want to as well have a variety, makes things a little bit more interesting. I should kind of wait for my green to dry, but you don't have to necessarily. It'll make for a more natural and prettier appearance if we blended some of those colors in. Don't be afraid to grab other colors. Put some flowers in the background and have fun. So not only do you have to use, could you use Q-tips, but you could also use a very interesting household sponge. Again, I took the sponge and I cut it into a strip, and then I folded it and used a clothespin to hold it. And I'm going to take that and I'm going to dip that into some color, and I'm going to have a new type of flower in my background. You can also do something a little different in the sky. I can take my paintbrush and dip it in the blue and the white and add that double loading small brush strokes to go over my pastels to make that beautiful sky, impressionist sky like Claude Monet. Don't want to cover up all the colors because I want some of that oil pastel to shine through. Have my sky. Can use my crowns to color my building. For my path, I colored it with some brown. I would probably have it maybe a little darker up front, and as it goes back it gets lighter. I could also use some things I found around the house, like perhaps some beans or maybe some rice to make it appear a little bit more interesting with my sandy pathway in my mixed media landscape. Ooh. So I don't want to put the glue on top of the beans or the rice. That would be a little difficult. It's much easier if you lay the glue down and then put the rice or the beans on top. If you want, you could add a little bit more detail to our building, maybe a door, some windows, make the roof have some shingles. You could also, now that the background is a little drier, you could perhaps go in here and make some clouds. Here I have a simple craft sponge that you can use. You can go over top and create your clouds. So voila, there is my magical garden by our famous artist Claude Monet, who quite often painted his garden in France. And we worked with our art groupie Stretch to explore and experiment with different kinds of stampers to paint with. So it's endless, the different ideas that you could come up with to paint and create flowers and to make it look like there's texture and those flowers are real instead of just paper flowers. You can make all kinds of interesting things in your beautiful landscape. So happy exploring and have fun creating your magical garden. Thanks.